President Obama, the inauguration, and Ohio.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Daryl Rowland, public affairs editor for the Columbus Dispatch. Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
Inauguration Day is a day for the country to come together to put political differences aside, at least for one day. Taking the oath of office for his second term, President Obama tried to do that. But unlike 4 years ago, when he focused mainly on compromise and bipartisanship, this time around, he put a stake in the ground, a stake that definitely leaned left, and he vowed to push for the change he called for in those many campaign stops here in Ohio and around the rest of the country.
America's possibilities are limitless, for we possess all the qualities that this world without boundaries demands. Youth and drive, diversity and openness, an endless capacity for risk, and a gift for reinvention. My fellow Americans, we are made for this moment, and we will seize it so long as we seize it together. For we, the people, understand that our country cannot succeed when a shrinking few do very well and a growing many barely make it. We believe that America's prosperity must rest upon the broad shoulders of a rising middle class.
Daryl Rowland, the nation is divided. Ohio is divided. Did that inaugural address help bridge that divide, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think he even tried. It was a second-term inaugural address. He doesn't have to face re-election. He doesn't have to listen to anybody's agenda but his own, and I think it showed. You had a lot of the liberal touch points, if you will, from gay rights to the safety net, the Holy Trinity, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, climate change, government is good. Didn't mention guns. That was about the only one. Not a whole lot about the fiscal problems that are coming up, other than a oblique reference to hard choices. It was short, certainly shorter than Ohio's gift to it, William Henry Harrison. Not that many memorable lines. The only one I heard was maybe we cannot mistake absolutism for principle, or substitute spectacle for politics, or treat name calling as reasoned debate. Otherwise, it could have big parts of it could have been from the stump here in Ohio.
It sounded very much like a stump speech.
I think, from my perspective and those I saw, so we were glad to hear what he had to say. We finally had a progressive agenda and a president who was speaking like a progressive on the issues. I think you're right. I think his whole posture is going to be different. I think the election allowed him to feel certain ways about who he is. I just wish they hadn't dropped the ball in the Senate, because I think it's going to make it very difficult to get anything through. But I think
with the lack of filibuster reform.
Yeah, lack of the filibuster. I think his swag is entirely different. I think his step, and that last piece, which he stopped at the door to turn back and look, that said to me, he knows he's a part of history. And I think the second term will be a major part of reinforcing that history.
Well, it's a great moment for America whenever we have a president inaugurated. We can all be proud of our system. But the great irony here was he was sworn in on the Lincoln Bible. And Lincoln, during his second inauguration, famously promised with charity towards all and malice towards none. Yet this speech was malice towards half the country who disagrees with him, and charity in the form of government charity for those who support Obama's agenda. This was not a unifying speech, much like his first speech at the convention in 2004 really set him up as this great unifier. Barack Obama has failed in that legacy. He has become much more of a divider.
But would it have mattered had he given a Lincoln second inaugural? Would the Republicans have said, you know what, you're right, let's work together?
Every little bit counts. Everybody who's willing to set the tone can be part of the tone, and people look to the president to set the tone. And I think we all agree this was a liberal speech. This was a clear I won. What he forgets, of course, he's one of co-equal branches. The Republicans in the House won too, and they feel that their agenda ought to be implemented.
You know, I thought it was interesting that he was sworn in on the Lincoln Bible. I think that, and what Sam says about Obama wants to solidify his history, his legacy in his second term. I've been reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's Team of Rivals, and she talks a lot about how Lincoln really wanted to be this exceptional character who made like a huge contribution to mankind. And I think that Obama may sort of see his presidency in that light as well. He wants to push for things that he thinks are important and transformative. And you know, you're right, the Republicans don't agree with his agenda.
Yeah, but Mark said something there that he didn't try. He did try. They questioned his birth. They questioned his college graduation. They questioned a whole bunch of things. And then you had a clown go into a joint a meeting of the Congress and get up and call him a liar?
There'll always be a few extremists on both sides, just like Obama's team said Mitt Romney was a felon, that he doesn't want poor people to have any Medicaid or Medicare, and that he wants to destroy the elderly system of Social Security and Medicare. So on either side there are people calling names. If Barack Obama wants to be a leader, he's going to have to set the tone. That speech didn't do it.
I thought it did.
He mentioned climate change. You know, a lot of these are all big picture themes in his speech, but you know, climate change affects Ohio. If he's going to push for, you know, a fight against global warming or climate change and lower carbon emissions, Darrell, that affects coal, which affects Ohio.
No question, and that is something that cuts across partisan lines, probably against him, because there's a lot of Democrats in Ohio, certainly from southeast Ohio, that don't think much of this climate change talk, because frankly it's going to shut down coal-burning power plants, which Ohio relies on. Ohio has huge repositories of coal, dirty coal, if you will. So that's really important to this state. But if he thinks that's the right thing to be done, if he's convinced that, you know, there's a global crisis afoot if we don't address climate change, let's see what happens.
But here's the problem. Pew just came out with a poll set of the things that President Obama talked about. For example, climate change and guns. Americans, that's very low down on their list of the things that they want the federal government to immediately take action on. What they want them to take action on is jobs, the debt, the taxation problem. Almost nothing on those topics from Obama during his inaugural speech.
What about, go ahead,
I think Darrell's right. I think it's problematic because 80 or 90% of our electricity comes from coal-fired power plants in Ohio. And you know, one of the big economic advantages that Ohio has is that we have cheap utility costs, and that helps out the manufacturing base quite a bit.
But with natural gas, you're seeing some of the coal-fired plants getting turned off because natural gas is so cheap because there's so much of that apparently coming out of the ground. There is an opportunity here to switch to natural gas and also maybe use manufacturing to build wind turbines, solar panels, that kind of thing.
I think there's an opportunity that exists for that. But long term, there are other issues in the manufacturing sector that we have to deal with. And the idea of dealing with those things are very important, because I think there's a large segment of people who are going to be permanently unemployable and will not have jobs unless we do something structurally about the two aspects, that is the training and the employment situations where they need support.
We'll get to that when we talk about John Kasich's trip to Switzerland, because that's what he was talking about. But first, President Obama was able to take the oath of office a second time because he won partly Ohio's electoral votes. He won all 18 electoral votes here in Ohio, even though he only won the state by just a few percentage points. A new idea being floated by Republican leaders would have Ohio and several other swing states scrap the winner-take-all system of awarding electoral votes. It would be replaced by a proportional system where, if it were in place in November, Mitt Romney would have picked up at least some of Ohio's electoral votes, or perhaps even a majority of them. Mark Weaver, is this a trial balloon, or is this something that we're going to hear more of over the next year or so?
It's not just a Republican idea. First, we should remember that Maine and Nebraska already do this. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment, and scrapping the Electoral College would require a constitutional amendment. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. This would help Democrats in states like Texas and other deep South states
But
that are
Republicans
red.
are only calling for Michigan, Pennsylvania,
Oh, sure,
Virginia,
absolutely.
Ohio.
And the reason behind it is when candidates come into a state, they go to the large population centers and they ignore rural areas. And as a result, the policy reflects that. This would require candidates to compete in every part of the state to get the votes, knowing that they're not going to be winner take all. They're going to have to win each congressional district.
This is like the Democrats in 2000 after Al Gore won the popular vote, of course lost the electoral vote, say, gee, we ought to change the rules. So often it happens, every losing campaign says, you know, we got to change the rules so next time the same thing happens, we actually win.
But Darrell, this one doesn't pass the smell test because all they're talking about is the 5 states in which they lost. Now, if you were talking about the whole electoral system, then that's okay.
I think that'd be a great idea. Democrats would win votes in Texas where currently they win none.
Well, and again, the devil is truly in the details here. If this is based on congressional districts, then we get into gerrymandered districts. Yeah. Again, both sides, but here in Ohio, with heavily gerrymandered districts by the Republican side,
it gives
wow,
the GOP
how's that going to be a fair, you know? Then it becomes who controls the state legislature, maybe who wins the presidency.
Right. It gives a clear advantage to the GOP on the current maps, and also, you know, Ohio would lose its swing state status. We wouldn't get hardly any attention from the politicians, which some might argue would be a good thing, and others
TV station, commercial TV stations.
But every state
like
would be a swing state because all the districts would be in play.
Is it going to happen? We have a Republican-dominated state legislature. We have a Republican governor. One of the reasons why Reince Priebus, the head of the national GOP, is pushing this because we have states where GOP is in charge but lost to Democratic president. What are the chances that Ohio goes this way?
Too early to tell. No one is really talking about it. There's so many other pressing items at the State House. I doubt this will see much quick play, but it's worthy of discussion.
I think the other aspect, until our governor's reelected, I don't think he's going to do that. That would add too much kindle to the flame prior to his election. So I don't see that happening before the reelection of the governor. Whatever they say about the rest of the states, I don't see that happening until he's reelected.
Go ahead, Darrell.
Yeah, all I'm saying, we've talked to legislative leaders, and it's at a minimum, it's not near the top of their list if it's on the list at all.
Do you ever see a day? You said we need to change the Constitution, Mark, the U.S. Constitution. Do you ever see a day when the Electoral College is put aside?
It's so hard. Remember, viewers should remember, it takes 2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the states to amend the Constitution. It's not been done in 40 years. And in this polarized society we're in now, it's hard to imagine any idea where you could get 2/3 of the Congress and 3/4 of the state to agree.
Mark, you said one thing a little earlier that puzzled me. You said the policy is leaning towards the population centers. I don't think that's true. I think the policy that comes out of Congress and the policy that comes out of the General Assembly in the state of Ohio is very conservative. It does not lean towards the urban communities at all.
Yeah, I think the people in the rural areas would disagree. And the best example is the war on coal. People in southeastern Ohio, their entire livelihood is on the line here with this overregulation by Barack Obama's administration, and they feel as though if Obama had come and heard and listened to them, he might have changed his own policy. But there's no big media market in southeastern Ohio, and so as a result, he goes to Cleveland or Columbus or Dayton.
But it's also economics hurting coal, natural gas prices being low. That's also adding to the quote war on coal. All right, our next topic, Ohio politics played out on distant stages this week. Governor John Kasich was really far away in Davos, Switzerland, where he touted Ohio's economic rebound to world political and business leaders at the Global Economic Summit. And one of his potential opponents, Richard Cordray, was nominated to be the permanent head of the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a post he has held on an interim basis because the Senate failed to confirm him.
We understand that our mission is to stand on the side of consumers, our mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters, and see that they're treated fairly. For more than a year, we've been focused on making consumer finance markets work better for the American people. We approach this work with open minds, open ears, and great determination.
Sam Gresham, that's it. He's staying in Washington. Not going to run for governor?
I wouldn't count on that. I'm not sure of that at all. On the first part, I want to applaud the governor for his efforts out in Switzerland, and the things that he do can bring more jobs and more industries to the state. I applaud. I don't think that says anything. I think what it says is he's going to stay there until he makes his decision on whether he's going to run. Fitzgerald and everybody else is in the running, but he, based on that posture right there and the presentation there, and in a lot of people's eyes, is the best candidate and their #1 candidate.
Well, and as this show is being taped today, news has broken that a federal appeals court has ruled that the way President Obama was making recess appointments violates the Constitution. And of course, Richard Cordray was exactly that kind of recess appointment. The Supreme Court could resolve this, they might not. With this uncertainty, it's entirely possible that this moves Cordray more likely to come back to Ohio.
When does he have to come back to Ohio? The election is not till 2014. The campaign really isn't going until a year from now, but they have to start raising money. And
they have to start raising money immediately. It's going to be a very expensive race. I mean, tens of millions of dollars, and because of the position that Richard Cordray is in right now, he really can't do any politics whatsoever. So he can only have surrogates back home raising money, and it's probably going on to some degree. But really, he's totally hands off on this.
He can't afford to wait. Now, remember, his fundraiser was caught up in a scandal that the Dispatch has covered and split the Democratic Party. If he's going to come back and create some order in the campaign, he can't do it from afar. And so if he's going to jump in, he has to jump in.
6 to 8 months, he has to make that decision in order to get in the race.
Darrell, I mean, you stand next to the President of the United States and you say, I want this job. Can you say a month later, on second thought, I don't want it?
That is really interesting, and Mark is right about the federal court ruling out of D.C. today about NLRB appointees, but they were appointed the exact same day in the exact same manner as Rich Cordray. We've talked to the attorneys, they're saying it's parallel. Now, the White House is going to appeal, so it's not like he's going to be out of a job immediately. But
plus, he still could get confirmed by the Senate.
He still could, and again, this ties in with the recent filibuster agreement. How nice are the Republicans going to play in the Senate? Lots of questions, but I think everyone is right. He's got to make a move very soon. I mean, Ed Fitzgerald is going to be in this race within the month, I would say, and he is already anointed pretty much as the front runner. If he's out there raising money, meeting Democratic parties, going to Jefferson Jackson dinners, Cordray's going to be beat before he even gets in.
Mark, does John Kasich want Richard Cordray to stay in Washington, or does he want to face him here?
It's hard to say. Ed Fitzgerald brings his own set of problems coming from Cleveland with some of his associates, with the checkered past and the corruption up there.
But he hasn't been linked
him
to that.
Personally not, but a lot of the people around him, again, are going to be brought into this. Cordray, of course, has really only won twice statewide and has lost twice statewide. So he is not a bankable candidate for the Democrats. And some people think he's clumsy on the stump. But he has run before. He has well known. He has a lot of supporters. We'll know soon, I think.
He lost a little less than Strickland lost. So he was the leading vote getter for the Democratic Party on the last ticket. So among the Democrats, he's probably the strongest candidates of the recent, those who've run for election, because he only lost by 1%. And that was a very, very close election, too.
It was.
Real quickly on the John Kasich Switzerland tour, Laura Bischoff, he talked about job training, advanced manufacturing. It seemed to be like a sales pitch he was doing.
Absolutely, and they're saying this is a more efficient way of reaching a broader array of CEOs and leaders than going on a trade mission, and it's kind of like one-stop shopping. They're all coming in, so it's a crucial place to be.
All right. Our next topic this week marks the 40th anniversary of legalized abortion. Needless to say, the debate over the issue did not end with the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision. Since that time, states have placed more and more restrictions on abortion, and Ohio, with conservative Republicans dominating the state house, seems ready to enact even more restrictions. Laura Bischoff, we saw the heartbeat bill last session. We saw some movement for the personhood amendment that declared life begins at conception, legally. Do we see those things coming back in the next session?
Absolutely. I think the heartbeat bill will for sure come back, and I think that Ohio Right to Life has sort of made its peace with the faction that was pushing this, as long as it's like the compromised version that they kind of pulled together at the end. We're going to see Right to Life will push another effort to defund Planned Parenthood, to take away federal funding for their family health programs. I understand they're going to push for a ban on sex selection abortions. They're going to also work on adoption and foster care reforms. And I talked with NARAL Pro-Choice on the other side, and their strategy is they have a couple of things they'd like to push, but mostly they just want to stop the anti-abortion folks from getting all these things, because they have a very friendly legislature toward it.
Do we ever see a point, it's not going to happen in the next couple of years in Ohio, but you ever see a point where abortion restrictions are loosened? We've seen it in the gun area where
it's unlikely to happen right now. I know the Dispatch had a front page story last week, and other new outlets have talked about this. There is a growing trend of people identifying themselves as pro-life. and the direction is unmistakable. When you look at the polling over the last 15 or 20 years, people who call themselves pro-life has grown, and it's hard to imagine what would change that trend anytime soon.
You know, speaking of polls, there was, the Pew Research Center also had a poll out, said that 63% of the public nationwide oppose overturning Roe, and then 29% would like to see it overturned. And these numbers haven't really budged much in the last 10 to 20 years.
So that's one of the tricks though in polling. You got this question, of course, is one of the quintessential volatile issues of our time. Depends on how you ask the question. The Pew question is good. Solid majority wants to keep Roe, but under what circumstances? If you add up those who want abortion illegal plus those who want it legal, but only under very few circumstances, such as maybe rape, incest, what have you, that's been a clear and that's been a growing majority. If you divide it up and ask it that way,
be careful of what you ask for. I think the worst thing that the right would want is to overturn Roe. I really do think that would be the worst thing that they could do.
If that happened, it would simply devolve to the states as it was pre-Roe, and each state would have its own policies. We know Massachusetts would allow abortion, and we can guess that Utah would not.
Yeah, but you're right there, because the Republicans have been consumed with this all over the country, introducing hundreds of bills regarding this, and I wish they had spent some time worrying about jobs. This seems to carry their mentality overwhelmingly, a woman's body.
Or babies being killed. That's how they view it.
Let's get to our last topic. Here is a tip. When you post something to the World Wide Web, there is a chance, just a chance, it might be seen by the whole wide world. 2 Ohio policymakers are the latest to learn this lesson. First, the head of the agency that regulates power companies in Ohio tweeted a suggestion that global warming is a myth. Then the president of the State Board of Education, Deb Terhar, posted this image on her personal Facebook page. It's from a conservative website that opposes President Obama's gun regulation plan. Terhar issued a statement saying she did not mean to compare the president to Adolf Hitler. And she said, like millions of Facebook users, I simply shared a photograph on Facebook posted by another person. I regret the consequences of carelessly sharing that picture, and I will be more selective in my use of social media in the future. Mark Weaver, you train public officials on how to use social media. Are these your latest 2 examples how not to do it?
Yeah, we might talk. Well, I think this one is much more interesting than the PUCO chairman, who's entitled to have his opinions and tweet them if he likes. There's 2 issues here. Is we shouldn't be comparing anybody to Hitler or Stalin. Barack Obama's not Hitler. He's also not Lincoln, by the way, but these people won't be recreated in our lifetimes, Hitler on the bad side or Lincoln on the great side. But let's look at the social media issue. Years ago, when you gave your opinion at a cocktail party, only those people heard it, and they might repeat it to somebody, but didn't have the impact. Yeah. Now, when you sit down at your computer, it's very easy to type out your thoughts. What we at Social Media Council, the company where we train government leaders, what we tell them is, don't put it on Facebook or Twitter if you wouldn't like to see it on the front page of the paper tomorrow. And if you have that, and we tell our kids this too, I'm raising teenagers, they have Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts.
Don't blast your teacher on Facebook.
Don't say anything that you wouldn't want either your mom and I to look at or your future employer to look at. And if you just had that simple screen, we wouldn't have these problems.
Should there are calls for these folks to resign, especially to hire the state education person who posted the Hitler reference. Should they have to quit for this?
I don't think so. I think that they should quit for some of their policies. I don't think they should quit for this thing. I think it's absurd that somebody think that they could put that up there and nobody would see it. That's what amazes me. And it makes me question the intelligence of the people who put it up there.
Well, when we got the Facebook.
That's right. You guys broke the story.
Someone who was President Terhar's Facebook friend emailed to us a copy. As soon as you saw that, this is not right. This is going to be a big story, which is nice for us, but it's an important public policy issue as well. Just as we've been discussing, I'm sure the greater public has been discussing the wisdom of doing like this. Posting something like this.
I don't think it was a Facebook friend who sent it. It sounds more like a Facebook enemy.
Maybe it was a frenemy. Everyone says and does dumb things. Doing it on social media just magnifies it, and doing it while you are on social media and you are in a high-profile policy position like president of the State Board of Board of Education is that just blows it up even further. Like you said, just use a filter.
Well, and let's remember Sherrod Brown said essentially the same thing about Hitler and Stalin and unions on the floor of the Senate. This is not a partisan issue, as well he should have.
All right, let's get to our off-the-record parting shots. Final takeaways for the week. Mark Weaver, up first.
On the topic of gun control, before people should make quick decisions about what the policies should be, they should understand what the weapons are and what the differences are. I've posted a tweet just for Columbus on the Record viewers at my Mark R. Weaver account that has a 3-minute video that shows the different weapons in question. At least see what it says, watch the video, then form your opinion.
Okay, Sam.
I will guarantee that before this session is over, there will be a redistricting bill passed by this General Assembly. And the question is it the redistricting bill you want? That's another thing. But I can guarantee you something's going to pass this session because there's just too much interest. And I think we should take a little credit for that.
Darrell.
I just want to, I guess, echo a little bit of the president's speech about the name calling and all that. We've seen it in the political discourse, but too often we hear it in the public discourse as well. As Mark mentioned, I wrote the story Sunday about that, showing the great pro-life trend the poll numbers show. Gallup does, they've been doing it the longest. That's what the numbers show. So I wrote that. Last fall, I wrote the numbers that Obama was leading Mitt Romney. And both, in one case was the left, one case was the right, just blasting. Why would you use that? Why would you say that? You're biased, whatever. I don't know which way to turn, left or right here.
That's a compliment to you. Both sides are mad at you. You're doing a fine job. Laura.
I spent a good amount of time this week covering the Clayton Luckey story. He's a Dayton Democrat who was he resigned or he did not stand for re-election. Just this week he pled guilty to felony counts and misdemeanor counts and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. His activities and that of Carlton Weddington would not have come to light had it not been for the FBI's new public corruption squad that's based in Columbus. And I think that we're going to, with that kind of investigative horsepower assigned to this, we'll see more.
Okay. My off-the-record comment, I agree with Mark and other people on this table have said, let's not use the Hitler reference anymore. Only Mel Brooks should be able to poke fun at Adolf Hitler. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. Continue the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter and at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.